Miami Hurricanes have the talent. They've got the talent to win this Saturday, but with a lot of new important players, are they going to be able to gel immediately?
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're almost there, 2 days away from the Miami Hurricanes opening up the season at the Florida Gators. I am Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, co-host of Locked On ACC, writer at allhurricanes.com. Thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. They fix tired fast, zero sugar, and a convenient portable size. It's the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. Go to 5hourenergy.com and use promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. This offer only valid until September 30th on one order, cannot be used with other promotions. Go to 5hourenergy.com today. On this episode, we're going to make not only our game predictions for this Saturday, our season predictions for the Hurricanes for 2024, double-digit wins, ACC Championship, college football playoff, and we're going to start with X factors on this matchup against the Florida Gators. I am Alex Donno, of course, joined by an all-star cast. We wanted to bring everybody together. It was actually Bruce Warner's idea, a great idea to bring all these guys together because these are the most frequent guests on Locked On Canes. We have the truth teller with us. We have our boy blue, Larry Blustein. We have the recruiting overlord, Brian Smith. And Bruce, first things first, I'll start with you and we'll go around the table. On paper, it's hard to argue against Miami having more overall talent than the Florida Gators. So like even Gator fans have a hard time arguing against that. But the counter argument would be when you have a lot of new players who transferred in who are going to play important roles, Cam Ward at quarterback, new defensive tackles, some new defensive ends to throw in the mix, a new wide receiver and Sam Brown, new running back and Damien Martinez. Do you think that this group, without having a warm-up game, is going to be able to gel together quickly enough this Saturday?
Yes. And I say that because I've been down there and I see how together this team is. They are really unified. They are all in. I mean, I've seen it. They're all in. They hustle in the practices. They bust their butts. These guys there's something about what Mario has done, bringing in these guys, that they're all winners. They all seem like they just have a mentality, kind of like we used to in the past, and Larry knows this, us against the world. You know, I had Stephen McGuire on the other day. I had Maurice Crum on a show the other day. These guys know what it's like. Now, am I positive that they're not going to make mistakes? No, I'm not positive, but I do think they're buying into what Mario wants to do. I think they're ready and prepared to go up there and take care of business. I do.
Blue, I'll go to you next. And any concerns, specifically game one against Florida? This is not game one against FAMU. It's game one against Florida, to be on that same page this Saturday.
Yeah, well, obviously always you could have all the talent in the world, and we've seen it before. It comes down to chemistry. How are these guys going to react to the crowd? Is going to be like 80 to 20%, as far as Florida fans. Florida has talent. It's not like they're just coming in without anybody. They return a few key kids. But my only problem, especially in this, is if Miami should get down or they make a mistake and they get down 7-14 early, do they have that leader who a lot of these guys believe in game time management? And that, to me, is important because of the fact that, yeah, I've seen Cam Ward. I've been down there a billion times, and I've seen, I've seen Brown and I've seen Martinez, and I've watched the entire team, and this offensive line's massive and everything. But to me, the game is always, and not just this game, but any game is predicated on being on the same page and have that chemistry and not knowing about you, the guy next to you. And I think that's going to be something that we're going to learn about early in the contest. And I agree with Bruce says. On paper, obviously Miami has more talent, with what they brought in on both sides of the ball. But there's always that intangible, you know. I mean, Miami had a lot more talent than a lot of people that they played last year. You know, I mean, you can't tell me that they didn't have more talent than Georgia Tech and some of those other programs, but things happen. And obviously, this is the one year I would have liked to see Bethune-Cookman or Florida A&M first, you know, to get those kinks worked out. But yeah, it's going to be a challenge. Anybody on the Miami side that thinks this is going to be a blowout, you're mistaken, because this is just not. You got to remember that Florida prepares for an SEC schedule. That's what they recruit for. And we all know, obviously, you know, with the Georgias and Alabamas and now with Texas, Oklahoma, you know, it's a premier conference in the world, you know. Right. So you have to gear up, and that's what they've got. They've obviously, they're not a deep team, and that's the one thing. If one of those guys go down, you know, even if the quarterback goes down, you have DJ Lagway coming in. He's never taken a snap, you know, at the college level either. So it's a good thing for Florida that they're at home. But on the other hand, this is one of those games you just don't know. You just don't know until everything starts. But undoubtedly, Miami has more talent. But let's see what happens. You got almost 16 new faces that are in the 2 deep that haven't played together yet in a game.
Yeah, and Brian Smith and you and Blue both have covered a lot of these players since they were in high school. Blues probably covered a lot of these players since they were, you know, playing Pop Warner. But, you know, this is a group where, again, Brian, Miami has added a lot of new faces at key positions. What do you make of the idea of developing instant chemistry?
I think it's pretty hard to do. Miami, like every other school, uses the portal, minus a certain team in Clemson, South Carolina. And they've gotten as good a group, especially like the D linemen they brought in. You and I have had that conversation off the record and on the record. Like, it's incredible. But my bigger concern with chemistry, it revolves around the game day situation based on the new helmet sets. I wish Bruce would have been with me. I had one of the Auburn guys that does the communication stuff, like, showed me the helmet and showed me how it works and talked me through all of it. There are concerns. Like the Florida State Georgia Tech game, there were 7 possessions for each team. Those coaches are running it down like they're talking these kids' ears off on the court. I know they are. Mm-hmm. And if you've got fewer possessions, one error of any kind can be catastrophic. Normally you get about 10 to 12 possessions. They had 7 for each team. That is really low. So that's my concern. And if, as both Larry and Bruce talk about, you get down, you have a situation that goes wrong, how do you react? You don't know in the first game.
Right. We don't
Those
know.
Things
for either team, we don't know.
Yeah. Exact same thing could happen. Graham Mertz is a 6-year grad student.
Right.
But how does that work for him? He may not be. I don't know. Nobody does. So it's a really new situation. And I'm curious, that first quarter, how does Miami handle the crowd? That place is nuts. There's no doubt about it. I mean, Bruce been there. Everybody's been there in some capacity. That place is crazy.
It's crazy.
You have to survive that, and then you should be okay.
I think I was a lot less nervous until I watched Florida State and Georgia. Now I'm more nervous because everybody and their mother picked Florida State in that game. And,
Sure.
and I think one of the reasons why it was 7 possessions, because they ran the ball. Both teams ran the ball constantly.
Yeah.
So that chewed up the clock, and that's probably why.
Yeah, well, I want to, when we come back, I want to get everybody's take, not only on a game prediction for this Florida matchup, but who the X Factor players are going to be on the Miami side. And of course, you guys are more than welcome to bring up X Factor players on the Gators side. One thing I'll say about the building of chemistry, it's not an exact science, expecting all the new faces. Like Blue said, about roughly 16 new players in the 2 deep. There's no exact science to getting everybody on the same page. I know one thing that Miami has done when it comes to recruiting these players out of the portal to try to make them quick fits is they've gone after guys who play in similar systems to what Miami runs. And in several cases, they've gone after guys who actually have history with Miami coaches, right? Connections with Jalen Alderman to D. Nick, the linebackers coach, multiple connections with players to Chavis Jackson and to Lance Guidry on the defensive side. Shannon Dawson coached Sam Brown a couple of years ago at Houston. Cam Ward, they feel like, comes from a similar offense to make a quick transition. So hopefully that aids in it. And we talk about some of these players. Who are the X factors going to be? My friends, we've got an elite roundtable with us. We got our boy Blue. We got the recruiting overlord. We got the truth teller. We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. You want to keep it locked. I've been needing these 5-hour energy shots because it's been a busy week. It's going to be a busy weekend coming up for me. I'm going to be up in Gainesville for the game. And yeah, I get tired after lunch. We all do. Research shows that more than 70% of us hit the wall after lunch. Let a 5-hour energy shot help you leap over that wall instead of crashing into it. With zero sugar, convenient portable size, it's the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. The 5-Hour Energy website has flavors galore like watermelon, tropical burst, grape, berry, and more. There's a flavor for everyone. Try them all. On the site, you even have the option to build your own 12-pack or 24-pack. You choose the flavors, and it's delivered right to your door. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that's the number 5hourenergy.com, get some 5-Hour Energy product today. You can use my promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid till September 30th on one order, cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Go to 5hourenergy.com today. Thank you so much for making this episode of Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. Make sure you're also checking out Locked On College Football. Spencer McLaughlin does an awesome job covering all the biggest games each and every weekend, all the big storylines in college football. Check out Locked On College Football, available free wherever you get your podcasts and available free on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. All right, so I'm going to start with Brian Smith on this one. Now, there are certain areas of the field where I think Miami can build advantages in this game, but any specific players come to mind on the Miami side who you think can be X factors in this matchup?
That one's easy. It's Jacoby George for me. I think that his speed is going to be a very important factor because, and I'm not trying to pick on anybody, but UF just got smoked last year in the worst possible moments over the top. I'm a see it, believe it guy. And, they have, I'm not going to name names. I try to throw anybody under the bus, but they had guys just failed their assignments far too often. And some of them are coming back in that secondary. I need to see it. And we all know that Jacoby's got the speed. He's got proven track record, had 3 touchdowns against A&M last year. They're going to go up top at some point. Can UF slow that down? Especially with Cam, he's got a great arm, and the O-line should be one of the top 10, I think, in college football, conservatively. UM will have plenty of opportunities to take the top off the defense.
I like it. Bruce Warner, what about you? Which X factor is going to help hopefully give Miami the edge against the Gators on Saturday?
I'm looking at 2 guys on the defense. Maui Noah, the middle linebacker, who's incredible. He's going to be in blitz packages. There's going to be times when, and I know this, there's going to be 4 defensive ends and no tackles, and they're just going to go flying after Mertz.
The NASCAR package.
Yeah, and Messidor, because Messidor didn't play last year hardly at all, and he's had a hell of a summer. And everybody talks about Bain, but this kid's got a motor on him. I think between Maui Noah and Messidor and Barron and those guys, they're going to be running, and Mertz will be running for his life. I know they're going after this kid, and let him prove it that he can go deep. He doesn't throw deep that often, so that means they're going to have to keep it in front of them. I just think those 2 guys are going to create all kinds of problems for the Gators.
Yeah, Graham Mertz last season only threw the ball 20 or more air yards just 39 times all year, completed 16 out of those 39. So that was not a huge part of his arsenal last year. Larry Blustein, I'll give you the last word on this. Any X factor players you're looking for on the Miami side?
Well, let me first agree with Bruce, what he said up front, because of the fact that Miami's defense is, especially the line, has an opportunity to be one of the best in the country by the end of the year. And the very fact that, although Florida brings back a bunch of kids up front like Austin Barber, who did a pretty good job for him, Kanaja Harris on the offensive line, but they still have some problems with depth. So I think Miami's defensive line kind of fires the first shot as far as that's concerned. And then player-wise, to me, from 30 yards in, I don't think there's a more dynamic player in the country than Xavier Restrepo. He's proven it. He's going to be a mismatch with any safety that has to cover him because of the fact that Miami's gone to more of a balanced offense. So they have to really watch the running game. So that's going to free up somebody like Restrepo. 56 yards or 56 catches away from being the all-time leading receiver at Miami when people doubted him from day one, too small, too slow. And I think he becomes the important part on the offensive side of the ball. And defensively, it's that whole line because even though that Florida's, got a really good returning group of offensive linemen, they're not deep. And if one guy goes out, then they get overwhelmed.
Now, I've already gone on record with my game prediction for this one. I think all of you guys have said it's probably going to be a close one. I know up until a few weeks ago, Bruce was predicting a blowout. I think you've gone a little bit more towards the close game aspect. So I am picking Miami 27-24. That's my score prediction, which means we're going to be on the edges of our seats right up until the final whistle when the clock hits quadruple zeros. But we'll go around the table on this one. Larry Blustein, I'll start with you. Your prediction for this one, how's it going to play out, and what's your final score?
He already predicted Florida. Don't ask him anything.
I think that was off air. I don't think we got it. I don't think we got it on the record yet. I mean, you can boo him if you want, but Blue, the floor is yours.
Yeah, well, the whole thing is I know this is a Hurricane program, but you got to be objective, and that's where I am. Yeah. I think it's 24-21 Miami down the stretch, and Florida beats them with a late touchdown, 28-24.
Oh, wow. All right. Well, Bruce, I'll let you go next because I don't think you agree with Blue's final score.
No, I was going with 38-17, 38-21. I'm going back. I'm changing it again. 31-23 Miami. I just don't see anybody stopping this offense. I just don't. They're so loaded. The depth at receiver and running back and the tight ends. The tight ends are going to be involved. I'm telling you. Watch for Riley Williams. I saw him get deep a lot. He's really dynamite stretching the defense. I don't know who's going to stay with him. He's massive. Arroyo's massive. And Elijah Lofton is in. We've seen him. He's incredible. Blue, you've seen him. He's my dynamic high school player. Kid. He's playing. He looks like he's in the NFL already.
Other than Jeremiah Smith, he's the most dynamic freshman coming into the country. And nobody really knows a lot about him. He's a 5-position player that last year in the state title game for Bishop Gorman ran one, threw one, caught one, and picked one off for a touchdown. And when my friend of mine's the offensive line coach at Bishop Gorman, his son told me when they had Brevin Jordan, he said, "Oh, make Brevin Jordan look like a little leaguer."
Right. And he's diversified, but he's also he's a mismatch for anybody that's going to try to stay with him. A mismatch.
Yeah. All right. So far the panel is split 1-1. We got to vote for the Gators. We got to vote for the Canes. I'll let Brian Smith break the tie in either direction. Who's winning this game?
I got the Canes 24-20. I like Miami for the reasons that everybody's talked about in general. The defensive line, I think, for Miami, and I think they'll hit more big passing plays. I expect there to be the stupid penalties and drops and things that come with game ones, or also to be more scoring. But I think Miami will win a pretty good defensive game. I don't think that Florida has the horses depth-wise that Miami does. That'll be the fourth quarter difference. And as Bruce talked about, they've got so much offensive talent. I think that'll be an edge for the Kings that wins them.
What about
that
the refs?
That means that Bruce and Brian will be invited back on the show, and the fans don't want
Luke can sit the rest of the season out. Well, I did, and something.
I'm not
ahead,
stupid.
Well, something I wanted to pick Blue and Brian's brain on this because all week I've been talking about the game. I haven't really this week talked about the recruiting angles for this one because there's going to be a lot of blue chip visitors. Now the blue chip visitors are going to be on Florida's dime this weekend, but there's some guys who are also considering Miami and Blue. How important is a game like this when Miami and Florida compete for a lot of the same players out of high school? What can a game like this, whoever wins this game, how can it boost their recruiting?
Well, you know me, and I always tell you this: if anything hinges on one game, then the recruit really. I want a guy that's all in any school, and the one game to me is not going to make a difference. There, you might have a lot of young kids, maybe 27, 26 class, who are junior, sophomores, who may get a little spike and say, "Oh my God, what a great atmosphere! I want to play here." But a lot of the senior kids that are already committed, that will be there, already have their mind made up, and they're not going to let one game sway them. But for the fans' sake, you're going to have 200-300 recruits there. It's going to be I told Joe Zagacki the other night, just before your game, just look down to the left side and you'll see a stream of kids coming out. And those will all be really, really good recruits. There's going to be a lot of guys that are committed to both teams there. And but I don't think it's going to sway it. I just think it's going to if you're a Florida guy and they win, you're going to be oh my God, I can't wait to be here. And if you're a Miami guy and you win, you go, you know what? We can play up against anybody in the country. And when I get there, it's going to be a lot better. And if you look at the recruiting class, and I'm sure Brian will agree that Miami's recruiting class, although Florida's kind of, really made some dents over the last, with getting Nashon and also getting Hanks and, from South Florida. So that kind of helped them a lot. But Miami's recruiting class is on the borderline of absurd, because if they feel confident that they'll get Jamie French. I'm not so sure, but you never know. Brian, he's really close with Hilton, who loves Miami, and they think that they could turn a couple of kids who've committed elsewhere. But we're in the age of NIL, and I think the NIL kind of dictates, if you come from an area that or a family that doesn't have a lot of money, when someone waves something in front of your face, you're more apt to go there. And but here's the deal about the portal. It's not where you start, it's where you end up. And you'll see a lot of kids maybe start out at a lot of these programs, but come talk to me in 2-3 years when they're at other programs. And that's just the way, unfortunately, college football has moved, and it's I don't like it. I'm old school, but that's, I'm not going to fight. I'm not going to fight what's a reality.
What about you, Brian? Anything you want to add to the significance of this game for recruiting?
Two things. One, just what he was talking about with the portal. It came out yesterday, a little more detail. There's an AP article talking about the NCAA's voting potentially, I think it's October, regarding kids not having the spring window. So that whole dilemma last spring with all the teams stealing other players, just going to throw that out there. That may be going away. So just, you ought to go check that article out. But this is a big game for both teams, because I know kids flat out. I had one kid this spring, no lie. I asked him, how come you didn't mention Florida to me? He was a kid from somewhere in Central Florida. And he said, well, Napier's going to get fired. Why do I was like, wow. So if Florida comes out and lays an egg and they got they're going to have a ton of kids there. If I was a recruit, I'd want to go to that game. I get it. If they lay an egg in front of everybody, it's the sign of the end for them. It's the apocalypse for Billy and that group. Miami, they've got a lot of the kids they want are going to be at that ball game. And don't forget, there will be a lot of 26 and 27 recruits there as well, juniors and sophomores. This impacts a lot of people, and there's nothing like the eye test. One of these teams really outplays the other, they gain an edge.
Wow. Well, I like that. And when we come back, we've made our game predictions. Want to make the season predictions coming up. And does one game, but does Florida State struggling out of the gate, does that change our predictions for Miami's season when maybe you feel a little bit better about that matchup with the Seminoles? You guys want to keep it locked right here. We got the all-star panel with us, Bruce Warner, Larry Blustein, Brian Smith here on the roundtable. We'll be back on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Folks, FanDuel has gotten me through the summer with all the awesome action. You can get action on Miami at Florida Hurricanes are 2.5-point favorites this coming weekend. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. With a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment that you can cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. We are also proudly brought to you by Factor Meals. Fuel up with Factor's no prep, no mess meals. Meet your wellness goals thanks to the menu of chef-crafted meals with options like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. So no matter how busy you are, you'll always have time to enjoy nutritious, great tasting meals. They have 35 different meals and more than 60 add-ons to choose from every week. You'll always have new flavors to explore. Crush your wellness goals with dietitian-approved meals and ingredients that you can trust. Treat yourself to restaurant-quality meals that feature premium ingredients like filet mignon, shrimp, and blackened salmon. Enjoy effortless support for your lifestyle. Choose from 6 menu preferences to help you either manage calories, maximize protein intake, avoid meat, or simply eat well-balanced. Head to factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50 and use code LockedOnCollege50 to get 50% off your first box, plus 20% off your next month. That's code LockedOnCollege50 at factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50 to get 50% off your first box, plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. Thank you so much for making this special Locked On Canes Roundtable your first or your second listen today. I did already put out an episode today where Brandon Olson from Locked On Gators and we were debating Cam Ward versus Graham Mertz. I was telling him how silly he was saying that the humidity will play a factor in Florida's favor, as if there's no humidity. We're going to leave the frozen tundra of Coral Gables to go up and play in the swamp. But guys, season predictions. I've already gone on record with a 10-2. I'm going to stick with that, even though I'm feeling better about the Florida State game based on what they put on film last week. Because, obviously you never know. Miami may end up losing a game that they shouldn't. That's just the nature of the beast in college football. So I'm going to stick with my 10-2. Brian Smith, I'll go to you first. Your record prediction for Miami this year, and does that include an ACC championship in your mind? How do you think it plays out?
I've got 10-2 as well. I think they'll be in the ACC title game. I think it'll be the Canes and the Clemson Tigers. I don't think that's a shock after watching Florida State. I'm not picking Florida State to be in the ACC title game. I can assure you that. I've got the 2 games that they're going to lose being Louisville and Georgia Tech. They're both road games. I think they'll both be close. They could certainly win those. I got Virginia Tech at home. That's kind of a sneaky game. They do play the Noles. But except for this one, I think the schedule is pretty easy for Miami, especially compared to last year. They've got an easier slate.
What about you, Bruce? Your prediction for this season?
Do you really want to hear it?
I don't know. When you put it that way, I'm not sure.
I mean, on paper, 12-0. But do I think we're going to win every game? No. And one of the things we didn't talk about, but we talk about on your show, is I'm still concerned about the big question: can Mario really coach? When he got here, people were screaming about the recruiting and can he really coach? Last year didn't prove it, that's for sure. So I am concerned about that. So I'm going to say 10-2. I don't think we're losing to Georgia Tech this time, even though the game's up there. Maybe Louisville, because Florida State's the week after, and maybe one other game. I don't know. But I'm going to go with 10-2.
Yeah. And the question you bring up,
and I think they'll be in the title game. And the fact that Florida State already has an ACC loss, when they play Clemson, if Clemson beats them, they'll have 2 losses, which may negate if Florida State does beat Miami, will still be ahead of them. So I think Florida State's, they already started out with 1 foot in the hole.
Yeah, and I was originally picking Florida State to win the ACC again, but I'm actually changing that to Miami. I still think 10-2 regular season, but I think an ACC championship for the Canes. And what you're talking about Mario, obviously he's got to answer those questions this year. I appreciate the fact that he announced that he's hired a time management coach, which, and by the way, people are poking fun of that. That's a common thing in the NFL. Like Bill Belichick for decades had a special assistant that helped him in his headset with time management. I appreciate the fact that Mario is addressing this and trying to make this process smoother for Miami. So what about you, Blue? Your record prediction this year for the Canes?
Miami's got more assistant coaches than they do players. Personnel. Yeah. I went down there a bunch of times. Man, they're hiring everybody. You know, I mean, pretty soon they're going to go, hey, we need somebody to shine the cleats guy and all that. But
they have that.
I think, as I alluded to, they'll lose the opener. That's in my opinion. And then the other two games, I think they beat Florida State and Virginia Tech at home. I think Louisville is, I know Brian said, that Louisville's still a really good team. And Brom's done a tremendous job, and he's loaded up, and they're really deep. A lot of people don't understand how deep they are. They could lose a guy or two. They went to the portal, but not as much as a lot of people, but they really recruited well. And I think Miami goes in that final game 9-2, needing that game to be in the ACC title game against Syracuse. And Syracuse, Fran Brown's done a tremendous job. They got Kyle McCord, a quarterback, and I think he really showed what he could do at Ohio State. They've got a lot of really good kids on that roster. Aronda Gadsden's son comes back to play tight end this time around. And I think they clipped them and put North Carolina and Clemson into the finals. So I just, that's just my opinion. I think Miami goes 9-3.
Boy, not only the fans don't want to see him anymore. I don't want to see him anymore.
You got to stop being like Kelvin Harris, man. Kelvin Harris. I lost all my respect for Calvin Harris when he told me that Hard Rock Stadium was one of the top 5 places in the country to play a football game, and
wow,
not even close. I mean, if you've been to LSU or Tennessee or A&M, you wouldn't say that.
No, but he says things like 12-0 every year,
every day,
every year. Yes,
I was on the show last week, and he was telling me how Miami's gonna. Man, you know what? But I would be disappointed if people like him and you wouldn't feel that way. I mean, being lifelong Hurricanes, I've watched Miami since I was 6 years old, so I understand. And but the whole thing is everything predicates, and I'm sure Brian will agree on game 1. Really, because then you'll have because after that, for 4 or 5 weeks, other than Georgia Tech, Miami's got those games that they should come away with. So if they do start off with a win over Florida, they could be 6-0. Right off the bat. And then people say, oh, okay. But that Florida game is everything. It really is, as far as a barometer for the season. But if they come out of Gainesville with a W, then all bets are off, really. I mean, and then, like Bruce said, then the questions will be answered as far as whether Mario can coach, because he's going into a very hostile environment, and he's never, been able to beat a team, excuse me, like that. You can't continue to lose to your rivals. You can't lose to Florida State. You can't lose to Florida, or like Brian said, some of those recruits are going to be looking in the other direction. So I can't say, but by 7:30 on Saturday night, we'll have an idea of what this team's about.
Well, Mario beat Ohio State in Ohio State a couple of years ago.
Yeah, but he didn't have this. He had Oregon. He didn't have Miami.
Right. Hey, Miami's getting there. I appreciate it.
I don't disagree. Yeah. I don't disagree, but hear me out.
Yeah.
You look back, and I heard somebody last night on one of those national shows say, I'm afraid of Miami. I just would never, bet them. I don't think he said what you did, Bruce. He said, I don't trust Mario Cristobal as a game day coach and blah, blah, blah. But you got to understand, and Alex and I have been doing our, shows and pregame shows. And guys, 2 years ago, that offensive line was one of the worst in the country. It was so embarrassing that we were talking about they were getting pushed back into 5 yards deep into the runner. So the runner never had a shot to do anything. That shows you that the roster moves that have been made over the 2 years, 65 different guys are on the roster than they were 2 years ago. So when they say one man or two men don't make a team, 65 does.
Yeah. That's well said by everyone. I appreciate everyone's time. From the Truth Teller, Bruce Warner, who you can usually see with us on Truth Teller Tuesdays and hear him with us here on Locked On Canes. Larry Blustein, another great guest of ours, and he's all over the place. Make sure you're following him at Prep Red Zone FL on social media, and Larry Blustein on Facebook. Six Ring Canes podcast. He also co-hosts and does an incredible job. And 560 WQA. If I wanted to list Blue's entire resume, we'd be here for another 2 hours. So make sure you check him out.
I may not be back
media.
On that Six Ring Canes after last year.
You may not be back here. I don't know.
Might not be.
Yeah, this is my last appearance with you. I love you, Alex. We'll talk to you next year.
We love you. Blue will be back, and so will Brian Smith, who's the recruiting overlord on the Locked On Network. He works with me at Athlon Sports on the Miami page, and also he does also host Locked On Seminoles and does a really incredible job. He's not a Miami fan or a Seminoles fan. He's just a professional, and Brian does an incredible job. We appreciate everyone's time, and we'll talk to you again. And in a couple days, we'll be watching our Canes take the field. We'll talk to you next time on another episode of Locked On Canes. We are part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.